We both saw a head and shoulders and a torso moving around in there. There's no denying that. And whoever this person was watching my daughter and I.
So I get in bed next to her, put the covers over my head, and I do not want to move.
Hello darlings, it's me, Christine D'Amour. So last week I released part 3 of my haunted house series, and I also promised you that if you guys got that video to 1,500 likes, that I would put part 4 of my haunted house series out that next week. And my D'Amour darlings came through and got the video to way over 1,500 likes within the first few days. So congratulations, my darlings. You guys are now going to see what it was like for me to experience some of the most terrifying events that I've ever had at my parents' real haunted house. So before I begin, I would first like to say that if you haven't subscribed and joined our D'Amour darling family, go ahead and come join. You guys are definitely welcome to sit with us. So go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification button down there as well so that you are the first to be notified of all my future paranormal storytime videos about my parents' real haunted house. And you definitely want to make sure you're subscribed because the holidays are coming up and I will be visiting my family up north very soon. So I'm actually thinking about going to my parents' old haunted house, knocking on the door and asking the new owners if they're experiencing any hauntings in their home, and I'll definitely be vlogging that. Also, if you haven't followed this series all the way through from start to finish, I highly suggest starting off by watching part 1, then following all the way through up until you reach this video, just so that everything makes sense. And trust me, there's a lot in there. So I'll go ahead and link the playlist to that series down below in the description bar. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on the video. As you guys know, I always like to bring someone in who was a witness to these paranormal events because I want you guys to know that everything that was happening in my family's house was 100% real. And to many people, it's fun getting scared and watching paranormal movies, and it's exciting to you guys. But unfortunately, what happens in movies actually happens in real life, and you never think that the house that you live in is going to have ghosts touching you while you're in bed or having things fly across the room. But in my family's case, we lived through a scary movie, okay? And we eventually had to move out. So my fiance, Chris, and eventually my mom ended up coming face to face with one of the ghosts that was haunting my parents' home. And today we are going to be bringing Chris into this video to talk about his crazy experiences. But first, let me set the scene. It was a couple of days before Christmas, 2008. So at this time, Chris, my daughter Lexini, and I already were living in LA, while my parents, of course, lived in Northern California in Woodland. So the three of us packed our luggage and the wrapped Christmas gifts into our car, and we drove the 5-hour trip to my mom and dad's house. And so we arrived that night, and it was only around 7 p.m., but during this time of the year, the sun sets pretty early, so it was already dark outside. So we pull onto the driveway and we notice that the guest house, which is at the front of the house and to the right of the driveway, the guest house has the light on. And we notice through the guest house window the silhouette of what I think is my mom or dad moving around in there. So every time we visit, I always beep the car horn and let my sisters know that we've arrived, and they usually run outside to meet us because they're so excited. So as soon as we pulled into the driveway, I honked the horn like I always do, and we started to unload the car. My sisters didn't end up coming out this time, so I figured maybe they were watching TV and just didn't hear the horn. And even though my mom or dad is in the guest house, nobody came out to greet us. So Chris and I thought that maybe whoever's in there has headphones on or is maybe on the phone or some other reason why they didn't hear us. So Chris just said, let's scare whoever's in the guest house. So again, through the window, we can still see the silhouette of a head and shoulders and full torso kind of just shifting around in there. And the reason I thought it was either my mom or my dad was because it looked too tall to be one of my sisters. We unloaded the last of the bags, locked the car, and started slowly creeping towards the guest house. And then as we were quietly approaching, the lights inside the guest house turned off. And so I whispered to Chris, jump out and say boo when they come out. So we stopped, we held our stance, ready to scare whoever came out, But about 30 seconds pass and no one came out. So I'm thinking, okay, whoever's in there must have saw us through the window standing here and was just waiting to turn the joke on us and maybe scare us. So I headed to the guest house door and I braced myself thinking that someone was going to pop out and try to scare me. So I swing the door open with force and I say, "Boo!" But as soon as I opened the door, I felt this gust of freezing cold air, like you're walking into a meat freezer. And even though it was in the middle of winter, for some reason, this guest house was way colder than it was outside. And so I'm looking around for my mom or my dad, and then I have that same feeling that I felt before, like when I feel like somebody's standing right next to me, but I can't see them. So I step out, I look at Chris, and I tell him nobody's in there. And then his face goes from smiling to confused, and he says, "Check the bathroom." So I step out, I grab Lexini, and he goes into the guest house. He checks the sliding closet door, he checks the bathroom, comes out, looks at me with big eyes, but says nothing. We both saw Head and Shoulders and a torso moving around in there. There's no denying that. Not only that, but we saw the lights being on and then turn off. We all saw that. So as soon as Chris steps out, he shuts the door behind him, and then the lights turn back on. And we see this because the guest house door is basically just one big window. And Chris is not going back inside, and I certainly am not. So we just head straight to the main house. And so I ring the doorbell and I don't see that the lights are on inside the house and they're not answering, so I figure, okay, they're not home. So it's really freezing cold, so we just head back to the car. I call my mom, I'm still scared, and I ask her where they are. And my parents say that they're on their way back, and we told them what happened over the phone. And by the time that they arrived, the adrenaline kind of wore off and we weren't so scared. So Chris and I just went back into the guest house. We looked around, and you know that feeling when you're walking through water, but the pressure of the water surrounding you is so dense and tight that you kind of have to just wave your way through? Well, that's what it felt like walking in there. When something that's that strong of a spirit is next to you, it does something to the air, and it makes the surrounding very paralyzing in a way. I just always wondered, why does the air change and become so freezing and dense and tight? But according to my research, if you have a light and positive spirit in your home, the spirit will feel very airy and peaceful and calm. But if you're dealing with a darker spirit, you could experience electrical disturbances that cannot be explained, strange dreams or nightmares, psychokinetic activity, which is opening of doors or things moving around the room, unexplained fear in certain areas of your space, abnormal behavior or reactions from animals and pets, feeling drained or mentally foggy, or seeing shadows out of the corner of your eye. Now, I know the theory talks about when dealing with the darker energy that you might see shadows out of the corner of your eye, but what if you come face to face with it? Now, this is where I'm about to bring Chris in, but I want to say that since we got to my parents' house, it was a few days before Christmas, and we just kind of hang out and spent the night there until Christmas Day. So Chris and I did not like sleeping in either the guest house or the two other spare bedrooms in the house. So the next couple of nights, we actually went into my sister's room, we pushed their two twin beds together and made just one big queen-size bed that Chris, Lexi, and I slept on. So in my sister's room, they had this heat-censored touch lamp that would turn off and on just by simply touching it. So for 2 nights in a row in the middle of the night around 3 a.m., I would wake up because the room was suddenly being filled by light. And each time I opened my eyes, I would see that this touch lamp was being triggered somehow and being turned on. So the first night, the light was set on the headboard, and I'll actually include a photo right here of my sister's actual room and the lamp, just so you guys can see exactly where it was placed. So as you can see, one of us could have accidentally reached our arm up and hit the lamp and turned it on. So the first night that the light turned on, I brushed it off and I just turned it back off and went back to sleep. Then the same thing happened the second night. I woke up around 3 a.m. being blinded by the light, so the next morning I decided that we should move the lamp to the other side of the room. And that night at 3 a.m., I got blinded by the light again, opening my eyes to see that the lamp was turned on while being all the way across the room. So this is actually the perfect time to bring my fiance Chris in, who was actually a witness to all of these things happening, and he's basically going to tell you what also happened on that third night.
So it's a little after 3 a.m. and I woke up because I wanted to check on our car. The night before, our car actually got broken into. It was the holidays, people are dumb, they try to steal. So I wanted to make sure that the car was, locked and everything was safe. So I go to the next room, which overlooks the driveway, and I beeped it. I know that the door is shut because it actually locked, so everything was good. Of course, this is in the middle of the night. I'm going back to the room. As I'm walking in, it's just so eerie, and all these things have been happening with the lights and things like that. So I shut the door behind me, and of course I'm already tense and things like that. I'm using the moonlight that is shining through the window to navigate myself back to bed. As I'm going back to the bed, I noticed a full body apparition. If you don't know what that is, it's literally a ghost. It's a full figure. I saw the outline of an actual person. So I'm standing at the door, looking at the window, trying to navigate, and when I look up, of course, there's this apparition, this ghost, that is blocking out the moonlight from the window. It's so dark and eerie. It was actually just as tall as the window, which is very creepy, getting goosebumps as I'm thinking about it right now. It crosses the window, blacks out that moonlight, so it goes right across the window. It's in the darkest part of the room, and I can still see how dark it was. That figure was darker than the dark in the room. And as it's right there in the corner of the room, it jets right at me. The creepiest thing that has ever happened to me, and I just get the chills. And I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. Of course, I'm freaking out. She's already been experiencing all these things with the lights turning on and off. I don't want to freak her out. So I get in bed next to her, put the covers over my head, and I do not want to move. I'm like trying to listen out to see if I hear anything, and it's the creepiest thing that I've ever experienced. So the next morning, now that it's daylight, scared, we're not gonna freak out and kind of like make irrational decisions and leave. I tell her.
My first thought when Chris told me this was the fact that Chris had left the room, and whoever this person was that was standing in front of the window was at the end of the bed that my daughter and I were sleeping on, watching my daughter and I. So this person, this thing, whatever it was in the window that basically attacked Chris, was it the same thing that was turning the light on in the middle of the night? I'm so glad that Chris didn't wake me up, because if he told me that, I would have been out the door.
Until you see it for yourself, it's terrifying. It really is.
Yeah, it's one thing to have things happen around the house, things being moved, hearing things, feeling things, but to actually see something, that's when it just becomes more real. Of course, you all know that my parents lived in this house for a good few years, so the story doesn't end here. I know that I told you guys in my last video that my mom did not want to be included on any of these videos anymore, but I did talk to my sister Alex, who also lived in that home, which my sister Alex had some extremely terrifying experiences in this house that were actually very confusing to her at the time. But now that she's a little bit older, and she tells me, based upon my research on signs, that your home is being haunted by a very dark entity, I understand why my sister had these experiences. Everything just ended up adding up in the end. And as you guys are following this series, and by the time we come to an end of my parents' haunted house series, you'll start noticing that a lot of different pieces are going to start to be put together, and in the end of the series, I'm going to explain everything. And I've actually been gathering data from some local paranormal research groups to the area who have also heard of certain Wild Wings homes being haunted, and I actually got in touch with a former sheriff deputy from that area who actually explains about the land that the Wild Wings homes were built on. So if you guys really do want me to get to that point, and you really do enjoy these stories, go ahead and let me know by commenting down below and liking the video, because I only want to make the videos that you guys enjoy. And also make sure that you don't forget to subscribe and join our DMR Darling family, and hit the notification button as well, so that when I do upload all of these videos, you are the first to be notified instantly. And also, if you haven't, go ahead and follow me on social media. All of my links listed down below. As always, I love you darlings very much, and I'll talk to you later. Bye darlings. Mwah.